course, wearing my Pentecost, like it all matches. Love that. And I'm a little casual today, but it does match, so it's really fun. I hope after this, Memorial Day is the perfect Sunday as a pastor to say, like, I got to be quick about it because you all want to get going, because you want to go and enjoy the beautiful weather on Memorial Day. You'll all go swimming later, right? And yeah, I would say out to the beach if I was in LA. So it's serendipitous, of course, in a very funny way that we are having thunder and lightning and storms and rain, because that's the verse, right? That's the verse. One of my first big memories of a Texas storm, so I lived in California for years. I've lived a couple other places, but I moved to Texas in 2016. I moved there with my rescue cat, Coco Chanel. I talked about Coco Chanel. She was a cat I rescued. I basically went to a rescue in LA the year that my mom died, because Coco Chanel was her favorite perfume. And I said, what cat will you not be able to place? Like, what cat is too aggressive to be in a home with kids? I live alone, blah, blah. And they handed me Coco. At the time, they were playing with her with oven mitts in the foster home. She was that violent. And I won't go into the length of it. If you ever want to ask the question, I basically used the dog whisperer technique. And I found out, of course, she'd been abused, right? Which is why she was that way. And every time she scratched me or it was a little aggressive, I would just make a really high-pitched noise, and then I would ignore her for a half hour. And that worked. Within 2 or 3 months, she was the sweetest cat. I had her for 10 years. She died in about 2020, right before COVID. And I got the famous cats you know now as Sonny and Cher. But Coco was literally the best cat I ever had. Sweetest, most wonderful cat. Totally learned that I was not the enemy. But at certain things I couldn't get her to play with. And so I knew that she hadn't always been treated well. So we had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. But the one time I ever worried about her was, of course, she was a California cat for the mean streets of California, of Los Angeles, right? She was found in downtown Los Angeles. They don't know what had happened to her. She was in really bad shape. And so she'd been through some things, right? Like, whenever I looked at her, she was one of those cats, and sometimes you have them that really look you in the eye, but not a creepy way, just in a way, I can see you, lady, I see you. And I was like, she's been through some things. So, we drove all the way out. I moved her to Texas, to Dallas, and we were sitting around during our first storm. And I don't know if you've ever been in a storm in Texas, but from California, I'd never heard thunder that loud before. I'd never seen rain that much before. In California, it hits different, a storm does. And so I'll never forget the first time we're sitting in my living room. Coco's asleep, as cats do during the day. And our first moment of the loudest thunder I've ever heard happens. And when you watch a cartoon and something moves really quickly, and so there's like an arc of movement, like a little bit of like a phew, like a smoke that happens because they're moving so quickly. Coco, within a second, was upstairs. So I saw her there, and then I didn't see her again, and for hours. She hid under the bed for hours. Because this is a cat who had never heard something like this before. She thought the entire world was ending. She thought her world was ending. And she was sitting there 1 minute asleep, and then phew, up the stairs. And I'll never forget that, because I kind of felt bad for her. I tried to coax her out with treats, and it took a while, and then she eventually got used to it. And now my cats, who are the rescue cats from San Antonio, so they're Texas cats, they don't care about the thunder or lightning. They're like, whatever. Like, if it thunders, usually Sonny will go, what? What? And I imagine, not that I'm going to equate people in the ancient world with cats, but I imagine that in the ancient world, when you struggled to explain how the world worked, right? You didn't have airplanes and aerial views. We didn't have weather balloons. We didn't have things that helped us to understand in modern science day what was going on. So I imagine that when your little community was flooded, the world was flooded, right? When your little community was experiencing thunder and lightning, the whole world must be experiencing thunder and lightning. Because I think sometimes, even today, our little world can easily become the whole world. And there's one word that I might ascribe to this psalm, and it is the word loud. This psalm is loud. Sometimes We hear about God and we hear about things like what? God's small, still voice speaking to us. Sometimes we hear about God and God is an eagle over her eaglets or a mother hen over her chicks. And we love those images, but that's not what's happening today. We're not talking about the shy God who makes sure that no one is harmed, that is washing people's feet or healing the vulnerable. No, this God today is big and booming. This is not a quiet, reserved God. It's a cascading, thundering, booming, big, loud God. So this is not the small God that maybe some of us know. But God is many things. Historians trace the Psalm's origins, again, like I said, to the north of Israel, that there was probably a Canaanite storm god that they would worship, that they would sing hymns to, or they would sing and do drums, they would sing and do these ancient rituals in order to appease the God that seems so big and loud. And so I love the idea, whether it's true or not, it probably is, because I've read through a lot of historians that think it is, that what we did is we just took that hymn and said, that's a beautiful thing to think about, but it's our God that oversees everything. So we don't need to appease the God, but we need to know that that God is there. It's a psalm of praise. This is what it is. We've talked about psalms of lament, orientation, reorientation. We had a discussion about that. This is a psalm of praise, of reorientation, of saying, gosh, there's lots of things going on in the world, and they're big and loud, and yet God is over it all. The body of the psalm centers, of course, on the idea of the voice of Yahweh as the reason. That through nature, that through the big things, we hear and we see God. And I think there's nothing more powerful than nature in the ancient world, right? Before modern things we have today, again, we watch the Weather Channel to make sure we have an umbrella, or we're wearing the right shoes, right? But for them, again, it was life and death. It was their crops. It was their livelihood. Were they safe? Right? But even in our own best understanding, we can't control the weather, can we? Sometimes people are like, there's going to be a storm coming up, and I'm like, we'll see. Sometimes they can predict it, and sometimes they can't. And I think there's something sort of interesting, right? I mean, I probably check my weather app multiple times a day. Who else does that? But imagine not having that. Imagine not having any clue about what was happening in the next 5 hours. You assume that what's happening now is going to happen forever. So you have to be reminded that these things are big, but in the end, God is still present. The psalmist's final benediction is a prayer that scholars say invites God to channel the great power imagined in the psalm towards granting shalom. The hope that Yahweh will bring the same order to both life and creation that the skies show in those big moments. And I think the emphasis on the voice of Yahweh is really the inspiration, right? This booming, thundering voice. What happens in the New Testament? Jesus is baptized in Luke, and is it a small, quiet affair? No. They say the heavens open up, and the Spirit descends. The Spirit descends. And I think that the one who wrote Luke, which is Luke, knew this was in the back of their mind, this psalm, Psalm 29, the idea that there's this beautiful moment where Jesus is vulnerable and he's being baptized by someone else, and yet God comes down, as only God does, through elements of nature to say, my beloved in whom I am well pleased. Again, the voice of God who flashes flames of fire in verse 7, breaks open the heavens to help us identify this man of Galilee as our Savior, right? That celebrates Pentecost. We celebrated that last week, the flashing of the fire of lightning indeed. And so we've talked about it, again, our Monday nights, the idea that nature is big, but God is over it all. And we need to realize that all of this is being said and written and happening again in an ancient world where, in many ways, they were not understanding what was fully going on. And one of the ways that all this happened with worship or lightning, it's that God we worship is over it all. There's not a pantheon of gods, but there is just one God that's over all of this craziness. But I think we need to be careful about these sorts of scriptures that make God big and thunderous, right? Do not take them too literally in the sense that the biggest noise is not God. The biggest noise for them in the ancient world was God. But the biggest noise that we have in the modern world is what? There was a movie about it last summer. Barbie? No. But it was a suburb of Barbenheimer. No, Oppenheimer, right? We and the human-made world have made big noises, made big storm clouds, made things happen that are crazy and incredible. And so we need to be careful not to ascribe the biggest and the loudest to God, right? I think we all agree that, again, regardless of what we can do as human beings in our limited but also wonderfully inventive world, is that sometimes you're in the middle of a thunderstorm and a lightning storm, and you're still in awe because we still have not learned how to fully harness it, right? There's bigness, and there's storm chasers, and there's movies about storm chasers. There's devastating floods that happen all over the world. There's crazy weather that we have right now. And I hope we don't assume that God is mad, right? We hope we don't assume that God is mad. We should in some way understand that the world is getting a little more dangerous with these weather conditions, but know that God speaks in the midst of it. We can't explain these things. I read one kind of description of this psalm by a pastor that I really respect. And they said, even as a pastor preaching this verse, cannot necessarily explain these things. One can only marvel at them. One can only embrace them. The bigness of God, the loudness of God, the brightness of God's lightning, the way the wind of God's Spirit topples trees. After all that top of bigness and strength and glory and enthronement and majesty, all that sounds big, right? I said this was a loud song. But what's the last line? What's the last line? God blesses the people with peace. That's why I titled the sermon Thunderous Peace. Because I think there's a beautiful dichotomy that we're supposed to understand about who we are and who God is. It's a great concept. Loud peace, strong peace, harrowing peace, storming peace, majestic peace, glorious peace. Peace, shalom. Do you know what it means? It means wholeness, health, well-being. Ultimately, when someone says peace in the ancient world, what they're saying is, may you be right with God and neighbor. May you be right with God and neighbor. And imagine in an ancient world where things are thundering and lightning and people are worshiping the thunder and worshiping the lightning. What happens when we get afraid? Oh, we sometimes do terrible things to each other, don't we, in fear? We sometimes assume horrible things about each other. The ancient world had people sacrificed, right? To the temple of fear to appease this and appease that. And we have a God that through the thunder and the glory and the majesty and the booming moments ends with a reminder that what matters most is peace. That in all the hubbubaloo, I said hubbubaloo in a sermon, and all the bigness and all the wondrousness and all the loudness, and even when we're afraid and we're uncertain, that the thing that God blesses us with in the midst of it is a wholeness, is a rightness, is a sense that we are right in ourselves, we are right with God, and we are right with each other. And so my prayer is that through the thunder and the lightning, and it's really hard for me not to sing that song, the thunder and the lightning. Okay, yeah, Wendy got me. That we're not afraid, that we're reminded that no matter what is happening, even if it feels like the whole world is on its axis, and that's an okay thing to acknowledge and feel and understand. But every time there's thunder and lightning and bigness and loudness, may we take a moment to tell our souls that God is present. And the greatest thing that we can embrace is God's deep shalom, where we are right with ourselves, we are right with God, and we are right with one another. Isn't that what Jesus said the greatest love is? Jesus said the greatest love is basically shalom without saying shalom. that idea that we love God, we love our neighbor as ourselves, right? That we love passionately and powerfully. Loud peace, strong peace, harrowing peace, storming peace, glorious peace, thunderous peace. In the midst of it, may you experience the deep peace that God is with you and knows you and loves you. God wishes for us to be healthy and whole and have right relationships with each other. May you, beloved community, find yourself surrounded by God's thunderous peace. Amen.